Willkommen bei der Asheville Vedic Astrology Kanal. Bienvenidos al canal de Asheville Vedic Astrology.
Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Asheville Vedic Astrology YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ryan's Vedic Astrology. I'm back again with the multilinguist Fernando Raul, speaking German and Spanish today.
I know a little bit of Klingon also, if you...
Do you know how to say it in Klingon?
No.
Are you sure?
Well, I can look it up, but no, I don't.
What can you say in Klingon?
Well, obviously, for all the trekkers out there, kapla!
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. What's the word that's they call humans that's not a...
Patach.
Patach, yeah, that's right.
But that's more like an insult.
Right, yeah, right. I couldn't remember it, but anyway. All right, so today...
By the way, astrologers are not geeks, just to let you know.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about Mars, so this makes sense. If only you could give this in Klingon.
I don't know.
Yeah. But all right, so today we're going to talk about Mars for a Virgo ascendant. And we've already looked at Mercury. We've already looked at Venus. Again, back with Fernando Raul from FernandoRaulAstrology.com. And when we're thinking about Mars for a Virgo ascendant, again, our goal here is to think about if Mars was working in its highest capacity, because your Mars is going to be anywhere in the chart, depending on when you were born. But we're looking at sort of the ideal Mars. And also if Mars isn't working so well, based on the fact that Mars rules the third house, Mars rules the eighth house for a Virgo ascendant. Mars is exalted in the fifth house, and Mars is debilitated in the 11th house for Virgo ascendant. So thinking about Mars, thinking about Virgo, the house lordships, third and eighth, and what kind of insights do you have, Fernando, focusing primarily right now on the lordships of Mars ruling the third and the eighth for a Virgo ascendant?
Well, this is going to be a disruptive planet for a Virgo Lagna, without a doubt. Mars, it's probably the most cruel planet, and ruling the third, Atrishadaya, although it's the least bad of the houses, it's still going to be disruptive, and obviously the eighth. And, although the eighth is an impressionable house in terms of the house schemes in Vedic astrology, he's going to take the qualities of the other house Mars relates to in a Lagna, and also to the other lordships of conjunction. So this is going to be a disruptive Mars, especially because he rules the eighth and third. So, Mars is the planet of accidents, and the eighth is the house of sudden ups and downs, of sudden upheavals. Obviously, it's the occult, the esoteric, but it's also the money of other people and the resources of other people. So in theory, this Mars is going to be disruptive. So we want to have this Mars in good dignity. We want to have this Mars probably alone in a house, and away from other planets that can get affected by it. In theory.
Right. And the point that Fernando brings up is the disruptive nature of Mars. And any eighth house lord is going to have a disruptive effect. But the reason Mars becomes particularly disruptive is because Mars itself rules over the natural eighth sign of the zodiac. So Mars is abrupt, Mars is quick, Mars is change. When I went into a dasha with Mars prominent within my chart, I've never experienced such upheaval like I did during this particular time period. It was one thing after the other, and it was surprising, because that's how the eighth house works. It's something just surprises you. Where did that come from? It's not something you can plan for. And when Mars does it with strength and with force, and it's extremely powerful. Mars ruling the third and the eighth, one interesting thing about this is a Virgo ascendant can tend to lose their dharma or lose their sense of purpose by giving too much attention to their hobbies or these kinds of personal interests. And the reason that's the case is because not just because Mars rules the eighth and the third, but the eighth is the 12th sign from the ninth. And so we talked about Venus ruling the ninth. Well, Mars and its rulership of Aries, it's ruling the 12th sign from the ninth. So Virgos have to be very cautious about giving too much energy, spreading themselves too thin related to like personal interests and personal hobbies and their own little like pet theories and things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. How small ideas can interrupt the big ideas, right? In terms of the third and the ninth. And not only that, you also have to be, in theory, just for people to know what we're doing, we're just combining the houses and their meanings in terms of the dispositorship of the Mars, in terms of what Mars is as a malefic planet. And also, how ideas can be very disruptive all of the sudden to a Virgo Lagna, how a person can have difficulties through short distance travels, how a person can have difficulties, sudden difficulties and upheavals with brothers, with neighbors. And in a way, how hobbies, as you just said, can have a disruptive part in their lives. And also how a Virgo might choose communication to attack other people. And how that might create difficulties, because the second is communication, but it's like basic stuff. The third is more of the ideal thing in terms of how you communicate to people, and having Mars there also ruling the eighth. This is a type of situation where a Virgo Lagna can suddenly, due to, I don't know, anger or whatever, say some things that might have serious repercussions in their lives, specifically because Mars is accidents. You have the eighth, which is the Maranashtana, which is 12th from the ninth. And these situations can have the results you just mentioned.
Right. And it doesn't even have to be, you don't even have to have like an expression due to anger to cause a problem for a Virgo ascendant. I've noticed that it can just be, something can be taken wrong because of that. And I've had that experience being a Virgo ascendant where I thought I was doing something funny, and it turned out to be the worst thing I ever could have done in relation to how people took it. So with Virgo ascendants, while they do have that good Venus, which can be soothing in regards to their speech and their ability to share information as a ninth house lord, when it comes to things like trivial matters, again, third house issues, they have to be more cautious, because even if they don't mean it that way, when you are a Virgo ascendant, words can be taken out of context and create a sudden break or change, and that's because of that Mars ruling the eighth house. And I don't think a lot of Virgos understand that about themselves. It's like an unconscious.
It took you 40 years.
Yeah, 39 at least, but
and we have to see where Mars gets delighted, where he gets exalted in the chart. He's going to get exalted in the 5th, and he's going to get debilitated in the 11th. So what does this mean in terms of a Virgo Lagna? It means that a person has to have that in their mind, the idea of how communication can create problems, how little ideas can derail you from the big, perspective of life, which is the 9th. You have to have in mind to be, what am I doing in my short distance travels? What am I doing with my neighbors, with my brothers? You have to have that in your mind, and you have to be creative from a Virgo perspective and a Capricorn perspective in the 5th to really deal with those things and have that Virgo capacity of detail to deal with that Mars, right? In terms of how it would be predisposed theoretically. And at the same time, you have to take that into mind with the 11th of just not letting, as you've said, it's not only your emotions and anger, it can be anything, but specifically if you let go of your emotions and angers in the 11th with this Mars, you're going to see that your communication, your ideas are going to create sudden upheavals due to your emotional Cancerian Cancer nature in terms of reaching your long-term goals and aspirations and even recognitions. So you have to have that in mind in terms of disposition. I don't know if you want to add more to that.
Yeah, and that idea of where Mars is exalted and debilitated, it's very interesting, particularly for Virgo ascendant, because if we think of, I'm going to take one end of it, and then I want to see what your perspective is. When we look at, say, Mars being exalted in the fifth house for a Virgo ascendant. Well, a Virgo ascendant, they are often the ones that are associated with being like yoga teachers or associated with yoga practice. I mean, of course, you can have a yoga teacher and meditation teacher in any kind of realm, but for some odd reason, and maybe it's because of their interest in natural health and purification generally, but when you take Mars and you exalt it in the fifth house, this shows someone who will try to have a very direct approach towards their spirituality, towards their philosophy. And with the eighth house lord there, it's not just sudden breaks and changes, but the eighth is about cutting away the things that are unnecessary. And so that's why you'll find that to be the case. And you'll find that when a Virgo ascendant gets involved in something like spirituality, philosophy, meditation, and so on, it is usually better for them to get into some sort of jnana yoga or some sort of devotional yoga is good for them because Venus is good for them. But in regards to their direct path, it's about kind of cutting through the BS of words, cutting through the BS of their mind, because a Virgo can get caught up in that. And that makes a lot of sense when we think about Mars being exalted in the fifth in Capricorn for a Virgo ascendant. But now what I want to turn over to you, because I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. When we think about just the 11th house, and we think about Mars being debilitated in the 11th house for a Virgo ascendant, what kind of qualities or what kind of weaknesses do you think that gives a Virgo that they need to be aware of and to work through?
Well, first of all, there's a saying in astrology that no planet gets a bad rap in the 11th, right? They all say that all planets do well there. In theory, they do in terms of a material perspective, but from a moksha, liberating perspective, it's just creating more credit for you to stay in the world, right? So that's the first thing you have to take into consideration, with any planet there. I mean, and I'm not saying that, we have to transcend and become enlightened, because that's not necessarily the path for everyone. But in theory, what you're doing is creating more credit for the bank of life.
Right.
And with Mars being there debilitated, it's probably going to create maybe some bad karma, or has, let me just rephrase that. It has the probability, the capacity to be predisposed to create that. If it's not checked. If it's unchecked, then it's going to go there. So what you're going to have is someone who is going to be, emotional about their will, who, Mars is the empire of the will. It's basically, our masculinity, our intensity, the way we address life and attack it, in order to survive, and that tamasic nature of Mars. And Cancer is basically, emotional survival. So what we can have here is somebody that could be a problem in their circle of friends, which can be a problem in terms of reaching their goals by not working with others efficiently, by attacking them, by being, hostile in many ways. And at the same time, doing that through communication, through ideas, and creating sudden ups and downs, sudden breaks, or, just becoming esoteric in terms of how you want to address your search in life for goals and aspirations, or just, mismanaging the money of others. Once again, emphasizing the 1-7 thing with Mercury in a Virgo Lagna, where, you're probably going to have difficulties with other people by just nature. And with this Mars predisposed in this negative way in terms of dignity, that's going to be more accentuated. So I see it like that in theory. And at the same time, if you have, just for all out there who have a Virgo Lagna and have Mars in the fifth in Capricorn, don't celebrate, because if you have other planets there, they're going to get ashamed. Yeah. In a very strong way. So, there's no such thing as a perfect chart, and there's no such thing as a perfect astrologer, and you're always going to have something. But, you have to take that into consideration too.
Right. And, the idea of Mars debilitating the 11th in Cancer, from my own personal experience, you get more of that in this section of the series, just because I am a Virgo ascendant. I'm terrible with my friends. I've thought about it over the years, and I realized, wow. And one day, I was talking to Melissa, and I said, you know what? I was like, if I keep being as idealistic and judgmental about my friends, as I have been. I'm like, I'm not going to have any friends. And she just looked at me because she'd known me for, 20 years by that point. And she said, you're just now figuring that out. So when it comes to a Virgo ascendant, it's very important to realize that one of the difficulties of that Mars is being, again, in a sense, having too high ideals and too judgmental of your friends. And that's specifically because, number one, it's in the 11th house, which deals with a type of friends, but also because Mars rules the third house, which are our peers and our associates in that regard. So,
Yeah.
so do you have any final, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just wondering what your final thoughts might be related to Mars and the Virgo ascendant before we conclude this little section.
This is I don't want to make people alarmed or anything, but this is a tricky Mars, and it's because it's the 8th and the 3rd, and it's Mars.
Right.
And the only other lagna that has this is Aries, where you have the 8th lord, but he's also in Scorpio, and it's also the lagna lord. So you got another mixture there. But here, Mars also, which we haven't discussed, Mars also gets bad dignity in the lagna in Virgo. So you have a pretty tricky Mars. So it's good to see this Mars. It's good to analyze this Mars to see where we might falter, where our Achilles heel might be in our chart in terms of a Virgo lagna.
Right. And one of the keys that to find that, aside from just looking at the dignity and of the avashtas related to Mars, is seeing what house does that Mars go into, because it's going to bring the 3rd and the 8th qualities with it. And so for a Virgo, oftentimes you will find that some of the difficulties that we've been discussing, they will tend to show up more strongly, more prominently in that house where Mars is placed within your chart. So it's important to recognize that. So, okay, good. Well, we'll go ahead and conclude there related to Mars and a Virgo ascendant. And then our next video in the series, we'll look at Jupiter for a Virgo ascendant. So again, you can find Fernando at fernandoraulastrology.com. All right, so you can find Fernando there, and we'll be back with Fernando Raul in maybe about a week or so when we do this next video. All right, see you soon.
Take care.
Yep.